welcome to this pre-concert chat for this Lincoln Symphony Orchestra concert. I'm Genevieve Randall, Music Director with Nebraska Public Media, proud to support LSO with these pre-concert chats. And you can also listen for concerts just like the one that is happening this weekend here on Nebraska Concerts, our occasional series that we air on Monday evenings. I am so excited to welcome to our chat here two soloists that we get to hear featured who are both with the orchestra, and we get some extremes in this concerto. Becky Van Bogart will be playing piccolo, so that's on the high end of the extreme, and Joyce Besh playing contrabassoon on the low end of the extreme. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Excellent. And as always, our enthusiastic maestro, Ed Polachek. Hello, Ed.
Oh, hi. It's so great to be here. And I have to tell you, I'm so in love with you ladies. I find first of all, this concert is a special concert. It's an addition to our season, and we decided to add on with a chamber orchestra concert in the kind of up close and personal venue, the Johnny Carson Theater. And since this is a double concerto for piccolo and contrabassoon and rather full chamber orchestra, I think it's a magnificent opportunity for people to really be up close and personal with two of the extremes of the registers in the orchestra, the piccolo and the contrabassoon. Coming across this piece by Damian Montano, who is himself a bassoonist with the Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra. When I was searching out possibilities for this particular program, when I came across this, I said, this is it. It's Becky and Joyce, and we're going to build a program around it. So here we are.
I love it. I love it. Well, I'd like to dive in with something that I get asked quite a bit from people who really love to listen to classical music, but aren't like classical music experts. And you just said something, Ed, that led me right to it, which was, this is a pretty full chamber orchestra. Can we get a little definition on chamber orchestra and why this is a chamber orchestra concert?
Well, briefly, to distinguish, because people get confused about chamber music and chamber orchestra. Chamber orchestra just indicates a smaller size orchestra. Very often has to do with the size of your string component. So we're going to be using 6 first violins, 4 seconds, 4 violas, 4 cellos, and 2 basses, which is pretty, that's about an average size, I would say, for a chamber orchestra. And then it never goes beyond really double woodwinds. And generally we don't have, trombones and tuba and batteries of percussion, because then you need more strings to buoy that sound and keep it. So the chamber orchestra is really woodwinds at doubles primarily, and horns and trumpets at doubles. And occasionally you'll have a trombone, occasionally, and very occasionally, a tuba, and a little bit of percussion here or there, whatever. But that's the difference between a chamber orchestra and a full symphonic orchestra.
Excellent. Well, so Joyce and Becky, I have one for you in the interest of those folks, again, who maybe aren't professional musicians. With the extremes of sound in piccolo and contrabassoon, is there a way we can kind of measure for the non-musical among us the distance between, say, Joyce's lowest note and Becky's highest note? How could you explain how far that is to someone? I mean, an octave, I think people know what a piano looks like, right? So maybe we can.
Well, that I was gonna say,
Yeah.
Let's use the piano because it's the best visual.
Yeah.
So if you walk up to the piano and you reach out and play the lowest note and reach out and play the highest note, that I think was where we determined we end this concerto.
That's us. We're the 88 key band.
Depending on either end of the 88 keys.
Yeah.
Well,
Yes, and everything in between, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, like all 88 keys.
Exactly.
Although I think we also decided that there's a little hole. We never actually overlap. I can't quite get as high as Becky's lowest note. So there's a little gap.
That's kind
we
of
don't
fun.
we don't tell anybody about that flaw.
Right.
I sing those notes from the podium.
There we go.
We just say we're the whole 88.
Yeah. And I'm
So
the whole in 88.
the composer of this double concerto, Damien Montano, he plays bassoon and is a woodwind player. He's played on many film scores. Just a little information, which people can read in their programs if they're watching this directly ahead of the concert. But if you're watching this, you know, a week out or whatever, bassoonist and composer, does playing a woodwind instrument affect or contribute to how a composer approaches writing for a woodwind instrument?
You guys, I'm going to let you guys answer that.
Well, I know as far as I'm concerned, the bassoon, the contrabassoon part, often when it's composed by someone who's not a woodwind player, can be very clunky. And I think Damien really respects that the contrabassoon can move and can be lyrical and can be goofy and bassy and kind of explores the whole musical range of the contrabassoon in a way that I don't see very often.
Mm.
Which is wonderful, which is absolutely wonderful.
And I think that's the biggest, one of the best things that Damien did was that the contrabassoon plays long passages, which you don't get to hear that very often. And
Right.
because there's so many keys, I mean, there's so much mechanism that has to move. That's a pretty tricky thing to do and not just hear a lot of clacking, you know, and I mean, you just don't even notice that she's playing this massive instrument when she plays. But the notes are so low, you have to listen carefully because they vibrate very slowly.
Yeah, amazing. It's amazing. It seemed to me that the bassoon and even more so the contrabassoon are is one of the most complicated instruments in the entire orchestra in terms of keys
Mechanics.
and mechanics. Exactly.
No kidding. Other than the contra clarinet.
Yeah, right.
Which is basically a bassoon.
with half
right.
of its reed.
With one reed, yeah. Right.
But I think I love this piece. I have to say, it spoke to me the moment I heard it, and I thought, what an incredible piece to present to our audience. The thing is that our orchestra is blessed with so many really terrific players, first class, top drawer players. And usually we think of that in terms of who our principals are, because that's where it seems to always go. And I have to say that Becky van der Bogart is an incredible person who kind of retooled the thinking on that whole thing, because she herself, as a piccolo player, considered herself a third chair player. It's usually the third chair flute that is doubles with the piccolo. And she created an entire organization that originally was called the third chair chamber players, for people who don't get the opportunity to play what the principals and the second players play, right? So you have a contrabassoon, which is also usually the third bassoon and doubling on contrabassoon, paired with the piccolo. Other things like the English horn, like the bass clarinet, the E flat clarinet. There are all kinds of other third chair worlds, but I think in the woodwinds it's most common in many respects. And I really am very grateful to Becky, and so is all of the Lincoln community, for establishing the third chair chamber players, which is now the Nebraska Chamber Players, which has opened it up. But it also has given a platform for people who have these unusual instruments to actually solo and share. And that's why I'm so excited about this double concerto.
Oh,
Thank you.
super cool. I want to say too, first of all, we'll just mention, yes, that is Ed's cuckoo clock in the background, in case anybody's wondering. Might as well just point it out and explain it. It's not like an accident we're going to ignore. Much in the same.
It's the fourth chair chamber player.
Yeah.
No, that's fourth column.
Oh, as far as, oh, sorry, okay.
But much in the same way, Ed, that you're saying, we get to highlight some of the members of the symphony that, sometimes you wouldn't get a flute solo for the third chair or the piccolo player. Although the piccolo can cut, and she will, right? She will cut through you.
Oh, thanks.
Right,
Right,
absolutely.
yeah.
There's a saying I have about playing piccolo, but I don't usually say it very often in public, and it's that it's kind of like being naked and unshaven in front of everybody when you're out there playing. So you kind of have to just get used to that, and that's just your life.
It's about that, right? So much in the same way that we get to feature some musicians who we don't necessarily in a solo capacity, this is also another iteration of a current composer's piece, which I
Yeah,
have to point out, what happens a lot with some of these composers is their pieces get written, they get premiered, and then those pieces get
That's it.
shelved. And it's so great that we get to see a performance of this. This is, I think, has been premiered a couple of times by the composer himself, when I looked it up. And so that's really great. So kudos for that. But before we run out of time, I really want you to talk to me about the character of this piece. Because
yeah, I was
you
just gonna
mentioned
say.
something earlier about contrabassoon, about being funny or goofy. And Becky, you referenced like the slow vibrations of the contra. And piccolos, get categorized as birds all the time, or
Right.
little cute twittery things. So what has he done here with the character for these two instruments?
Who's talking?
Go ahead, Becky.
Uh, it actually, I think with a concerto, often it's the concerto parts are supposed to be virtuosic. I mean, we're out there in front. I think what's important with a concerto really is how the orchestra is written underneath, because it's very difficult to often put a good orchestra part underneath soloists without burying them
Right.
or having them not be terribly relevant to the virtuosity of what's going on in front. And he nailed it. Damien did an absolutely beautiful orchestration. It's so French.
It's
And
brilliant.
I mean, it's so colorful. And, he did pull in a lot of different instruments, which makes the extras outside of the strings a little more than you would usually have. But it's just because the colors are so beautiful. So instead of using power underneath the soloists, he used color.
Amen.
And as Ed said, a lot of really good thematic work all the way through. So there's things that your ear can hang on to that go all the way through the piece. It's extremely accessible, a little funny, a little dramatic, but very easy music. And really, the sounds are just exquisite.
And
I
a
think,
lot of dialogue between the two of you.
A lot of dialogue.
and I think one of my favorite things about it is in the first movement, we're sort of going back and forth. We don't play together a lot. We play together some. And in the second movement, there's this moment in the orchestration where the bassoon and the flute, the regular players, do a bit of a duet. And then we come in and do a duet differently. And it's kind of like they're saying, here's how you play together. And then the third movement, we just get to play together. She does piccolo things, I do contrabassoon things all the way to the end in this kind of romp. And I like how it sort of grows into us being more and more of a duet as it goes on.
Kind of like good friends.
Yeah.
Off down the yellow brick road.
I love it. I love it.
I love this. Becky and Joyce, really quickly before I let the two of you go, so Ed and I can talk about Copeland and Prokofiev briefly for a few minutes. We will point out that because this is a chamber concert and it's a more intimate setting, you guys are in a different venue here with the Johnny Carson Theater. I don't know that I've heard the symphony play in there because you wouldn't put like a whole full symphony in that room. And there's two different performances, 6 p.m. and 8 p.m., so that you can have enough audience is able to come and see the show because it's a small space. What kinds of considerations do the three of you take when you're in a different space like that? How do you approach it to balance and hear across the space?
I think it's kind of just more like what we do in the chamber players. It's more of a chamber players kind of scenario. I mean, we're not on a stage. I don't think we're on a stage, are we?
No,
maybe in a lift or something, but we're really not on a stage.
no, with the
The
audience
audience
and
is
kind of amphitheater
Yeah,
coming
you know,
down.
so it's not a separation of church and stage, kind of like it is in an auditorium, right? I
Right.
mean, we're all in it together.
Exactly,
It's
exactly.
similar to what Becky was saying, how we play, we're often right next to the audience where they are kind of watching our fingers. I think Becky and I will be pretty comfortable with the
Yeah,
audience
we do
really
that a lot.
close, personal, watching our mechanisms and how it all fits together.
Yes, and
Gasping, breathing, and
Ed referenced third chair chamber players earlier. You guys are now Nebraska Chamber.
Nebraska. Yeah, I really.
In case somebody watching this pre-concert chat does not know, you guys are in Nebraska Chamber Players as
We
well.
are now, yes.
Becky Van de Bogart, she will be playing piccolo on this concerto by Damian Montano, and Joyce Besh will be playing contrabassoon. So it's a concerto for piccolo, contrabassoon, and orchestra. Sure to be exciting. I'll let you guys go, and Ed and I will talk about Copeland and Prokofiev here. Thanks to both of you so much. It's going to be exciting.
Thanks,
Absolutely.
Genevieve.
Thank you, ladies.
Thanks, Ed. Bye.
Bye-bye.
So Ed, here we are. We're going to talk about Copeland and Prokofiev next. I don't know. I kind of want to start with, well, let's just mention that Copeland. Let's start with that. He had a different title for Appalachian Spring originally, just Ballet for Martha.
Yeah, for Martha Graham. And I'm glad we're starting with this because we're actually going to start the program with the Copeland. It's it's a piece that I absolutely adore. I think it's one of the most beautiful, in so many ways, very simplistic, and in other ways, extremely complex, which was the genius of Aaron Copland. But he early on in his compositional career felt the need to follow what was the current ideology of where 20th century composers should be going, in the 1920s, the 1930s. And it was in the sense of classical music or the sophisticated 20th century music, not the pops type of music, was one of probably as complex as you can possibly make it. It was a reaction or maybe a continuation, you might say, of the new Viennese school that happened around the turn of that century, with people like Schoenberg and then followers like Webern and, well, Stravinsky first, but then, Webern and oh my gosh, there were just tons of these people, Dalla Piccolo, that Babbitt, that went into this serial 12-tone music, and super dissonance and exceedingly complicated rhythmic stuff. And Copland was a genius at that as well. But he began to realize that he wanted to incorporate more of the quote unquote American idiom, to a certain extent jazz, but not the way Leonard Bernstein did it, but more on the American folk melodies, the Western idea of cowboys, the rodeo, and Billy the Kid, that kind of thing. And he went back and forth with Martha Graham about the subject of this particular ballet. And it was, there was things thrown in there about ancient Greece and stories about Medea and, and nothing kind of really, it was like throwing al dente spaghetti at the wall. Nothing was really quite sticking. And then this idea of Americana came in, and it's actually about a four-person kind of ballet with some added, but four main characters in a settlement in Pennsylvania. And I've always thought of it being, kind of in the Pennsylvania Dutch area, perhaps, or of Pennsylvania, the farming community, and in many ways the Shakers, the Quakers.
Yes.
Because the tune that he picked to close the whole ballet, and it's one of the most familiar things, is "'Tis a Gift to Be Simple," Simple Gifts, which is a gorgeous, gorgeous melody, very simple, but very beautiful. And then he goes through all these variations, and it becomes incredibly powerful. To start from the kind of the betrothed husband and wife, and then the farming community that would all get together and help the new couple build their barn and their house with them. And so it was a very community oriented thing. And the way the simplicity of the life of the people who were committed to the land really developed their relationship with among themselves, to one another, and amongst their community. I think it's a brilliant, brilliant ballet. And then Copland just kind of took all of that into a suite. He put it into a suite that he called Appalachian Spring. And so the suite is about 22 minutes long, and it's one of my just absolute favorites. Originally for just 13 instruments. Now, the mainly strings, and the added instruments were flute, clarinet, bassoon, and piano. And then 2 first violins, 2 second violins, 2 violas, 2 cellos, and 1 bass. I've done it in that form. I've done it in expanded strings, which I'm going to be doing on this particular program, because as I said earlier, we're going to have about 20 strings, 6, 4, 4, 4, 2, in terms of numbers, first violins, second violins, etc., down to the basses. And I've also done, he rewrote the suite for full orchestra. But my favorite really is the chamber version, the chamber orchestra version. And I think it's a great way to open the first of our kind of series of chamber orchestra concerts.
And you know, we only have about a minute left, Ed, but I want to make a point about the texture of Copland's piece, just because I think it kind of bookends in a way with the Prokofiev. And what I mean by that is that when I listen to it, you hear that Simple Gifts melody. It's so smooth and flowing, and he creates his own flowing melodies and counter melodies as well. But he manages to merge them perfectly with these angular melodies, perfectly modern sounds. Prokofiev, in his first symphony, to me, does a similar thing just in his own language.
Yeah, exactly. And it's incredible. He called it the classical symphony. That was actually Prokofiev's own designation of it. He did it kind of in structure, but he did use his modern day 20th century cadences that he is so well known for, and some of the dissonances that are involved. But he also did homages to like Haydn and particularly Mozart in this particular symphony. And he said he didn't want, particularly in the last movement, he wanted it to be nothing but joyous and a real kind of classical ending to things. So there are no minor chords in it. It is all major triads throughout the last
Amazing.
and it's brilliant. It's brilliant. It's
an exuberant last movement, Ed. I am worried because I know we've talked about tempos before, and what is the orchestra going to be okay?
I hope so. I will. I will pass out martinis after the performances for them so that they can recuperate from it, because it is fast. It is. And you know, there's nothing easy about that symphony. Actually, there's nothing easy about this program at all. And you realize that the smaller the ensemble, the greater the onus on the individual players for color, for dynamics, for intonation, for ensemble. It really becomes quite a responsibility. So I'm very excited about this, because this fits right in with the way I picture growing an orchestra and making our orchestra greater and greater and greater in the heart of the heartland.
Oh, fantastic. Ed, I'm so looking forward to this program. What a great program with Copland's Appalachian Spring. Good choices all around here. Montano's Concerto for Piccolo, Contrabassoon, and Orchestra, work by a living composer there, and Prokofiev's Symphony Number 1, which he dubbed the Classical Symphony, 2 performances and a unique concert for the
Yeah.
studio with a chamber performance. Ed Polachek, our beloved maestro, thank you so much. This has been fun doing the pre-concert chat.
Thank you so much. Love you dearly, Genevieve. Thank you for the opportunity.